For a long time, we were taught a simple equation. If you work hard, if you stay focused, if you put in the hours, things will move forward. Progress would show up eventually. That belief shaped entire lives. It shaped choices, sacrifices, long nights, missed moments. And for decades, it mostly worked. Somewhere along the way, that contract broke, and no one sent a memo. In 2026, a lot of people are doing everything right and still feeling stuck. They're not confused. They're not lazy. They're not undisciplined. They're simply operating under an outdated model of how the world rewards effort. The truth is, hard work didn't disappear, but its role changed. Effort alone is no longer the engine. It's just fuel. And fuel without direction doesn't get you anywhere. What's different now is speed. Just enough speed. Systems move faster than individuals. Technology scales outcomes instantly. One smart move can outperform 10 years of grinding. And when that happens, the people who pride themselves on consistency and reliability start to feel invisible. They're working harder, not smarter. Not because they don't want to adapt, but because no one ever taught them that adaptation would matter more than endurance. There's also something uncomfortable here. Hard work used to feel moral. It felt like proof of character. You could look at yourself and say, I earned this. But when effort stops guaranteeing progress, it creates a kind of quiet anger. Not loud, just heavy. You start asking questions you never had to ask before. Why am I exhausted if I'm not moving forward? Why does it feel like the goalposts keep shifting? Why does doing more seem to matter less? The world didn't stop valuing work. It stopped valuing repetitive effort without leverage. And that's a hard truth to swallow if you built your identity on being dependable, resilient, the person who never quits. Because suddenly, persistence without strategy becomes a trap. You're loyal to a system that no longer rewards loyalty the way it used to. This is where people get stuck, not because they lack drive, but because they keep doubling down on what used to work. They apply more pressure instead of changing direction. They blame themselves instead of questioning the rules. And the longer they do that, the more disconnected they feel from progress, purpose, and possibility. But here's the shift you need to hear. The fact that hard work lost its guarantee doesn't mean effort is useless. It means effort needs alignment. It needs leverage. It needs curiosity. The future doesn't belong to those who work the longest. It belongs to those who learn the fastest and adjust without ego. Hard work still matters, but only when it's pointed at the right problem. And if effort alone isn't moving you forward anymore, it's not because you're failing. It's because the world moved on, and now it's time for you to move with it. There's another layer to why so many hardworking people feel stuck, and it's more subtle. It's not about effort anymore. It's about motion without meaning. Somewhere along the way, being busy became a badge of honor. Full calendars, endless notifications, back-to-back obligations. If you're exhausted, it must mean you're important. But that logic is quietly breaking people. In 2026, busyness is everywhere, and progress is rare. People wake up already behind, chasing tasks that multiply faster than they can be finished. At the end of the day, they're drained. But if you ask what actually moved the needle, there's an uncomfortable silence. That's because activity has replaced intention. Doing things feels productive, even when none of those things are connected to where you actually want to go. Busyness is seductive because it gives immediate feedback. You respond, you attend, you complete. You get the small dopamine hit of checking something off a list. Meaning, on the other hand, is slower. It asks uncomfortable questions. Why am I doing this? Who is this really for? What does this build over time? Those questions don't fit neatly into a to-do app, so they get ignored. Hardworking people are especially vulnerable to this trap. They're reliable. Over time, their days become shaped by other people's priorities, other people's urgency, other people's definitions of success. They're busy proving their value instead of creating it. And slowly, without realizing it, they lose ownership of their direction. What makes this dangerous is that busyness can look like commitment. From the outside, it seems admirable. From the inside, it feels empty. You start sensing that your energy is being consumed, not invested. You're maintaining momentum, not building a future. And because you're always moving, you never stop long enough to notice you're heading in the wrong direction. This is where frustration turns inward. People assume the problem is motivation. They push harder. They optimize their schedules, they wake up earlier. They try to squeeze more out of themselves, when what they actually need is clarity. Busyness keeps you distracted from the truth that some of what you're working on doesn't matter anymore. The real shift happens when you realize that being occupied is not the same as being effective. Meaning doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing fewer things that actually compound over time. The future belongs to people who can protect their attention as fiercely as others protect their time. If your life feels full but your progress feels empty, it's not because you're unmotivated. It's because you've confused movement with direction. And the moment you stop asking how much you can do and start asking what actually matters, everything begins to change. There's a belief many hard-working people were raised with that runs deeper than strategy or ambition. It's the idea that if you stay loyal, if you show up every day, give more than expected, sacrifice when needed, eventually someone will notice. Loyalty was supposed to be currency. It was supposed to compound. For a long time, it did. But in 2026, that belief is colliding with a very different reality. Systems don't remember effort. They remember output. Organizations don't reward history. They reward momentum. And for people who built their lives around being dependable, that shift feels personal. It feels like betrayal. Not because anyone promised anything out loud, but because the expectation was woven into the culture. They tolerate stagnation because leaving feels disloyal, not just to the company or the role, but to the version of themselves that believed commitment would be enough. They confuse endurance with progress. And when growth stalls, they don't question the structure, they question themselves. What makes this especially painful is that loyalty once created identity. You weren't just someone who worked somewhere, you were someone who belonged. Your value was reinforced by being needed. In fast-moving systems, that sense of belonging erodes quietly. Roles change. Priorities shift. And suddenly, being reliable doesn't make you essential. It makes you replaceable. This creates a dangerous loop. The more invisible people feel, the harder they try to prove their worth. They work longer hours. They take on more responsibility without leverage. They give more of themselves to environments that no longer return the investment. And because they're not being recognized the way they expected, they feel stuck, not just professionally, but emotionally. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Loyalty without growth is not virtue, it's inertia. The world doesn't owe you progress for staying still, no matter how committed you've been. And that's not an attack on character. It's a reality of systems designed for speed and scale. This doesn't mean loyalty is meaningless. It means loyalty has to be directional. It has to be paired with learning, with ownership, with a willingness to move when the environment stops evolving with you. Staying in the same place out of principle can quietly cost you years of momentum. The hardest part isn't leaving a role or changing direction. It's letting go of the story that says walking away means you failed. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes staying loyal to yourself requires breaking loyalty with what no longer grows you. If you feel stuck despite giving everything you had, it's not because you didn't commit enough. It's because commitment without progress isn't dedication. And the moment you stop asking who you owe your loyalty to and start asking where your growth actually lives, you take your power back. For a lot of hardworking people, the problem isn't just what they do, it's who they've become because of it. Somewhere along the way, work stopped being an activity and turned into an identity. You're not just someone who works hard. You are the hard worker, the reliable one, the one who pushes through, and that identity can be powerful until progress slows. When movement stalls, it doesn't just hit your bank account or your career path, it hits your sense of self. If you measure your worth by output, any pause feels like failure, any rest feels dangerous. Any doubt feels like weakness. So instead of asking whether the work still fits, you double down on proving you still matter. In 2026, this is happening everywhere. People are more productive than ever, yet more insecure than ever. Because when your value is tied to performance, you're only as good as your last result. And in a world that moves faster than human endurance, that's a losing game. The pace keeps increasing, but the standard for feeling enough keeps drifting further away. Hardworking people often don't realize how much of their self-esteem is outsourced to external validation. Promotions, praise, metrics, titles. When those slow down or disappear, the internal voice gets loud. Am I still useful? Am I falling behind? Am I becoming irrelevant? That anxiety doesn't come from laziness. It comes from tying dignity to productivity. This is why rest feels uncomfortable for people who work hard. Stillness threatens the identity they've spent years building. Silence invites questions they've been too busy to ask. If I stop, who am I? If I'm not producing, do I still matter? So they keep moving, not toward something new, but away from the fear of becoming invisible. The real danger here isn't burnout. It's erosion. When your entire sense of worth is attached to what you produce, you lose the ability to separate effort from identity. You start believing that exhaustion is proof of value. Struggle is a requirement. Ease means you're doing something wrong. But here's the shift that changes everything. Your value was never meant to be measured solely by output. Work is something you do, not the sum total of who you are. When you reclaim that distinction, you regain freedom. You can change direction without shame. You can learn without feeling behind. You can slow down strategically without feeling like you're disappearing. And the future doesn't reward people who tie their identity to effort alone. It rewards people who can evolve without losing themselves. When you stop asking what your work says about your worth and start asking whether it still serves your growth, you create space to move again. You are not stuck because you stopped producing. You feel stuck because you forgot you are more than what you produce. There's a moment that hits a lot of hardworking people quietly, usually late at night, when they realize the world they mastered is no longer the world in front of them. The tools changed, the pace changed, the rules changed. And instead of curiosity, the first emotion that shows up is resistance. Not because they're incapable of learning, but because learning now feels like starting over. For people who built their confidence on competence, adaptation can feel humiliating. You spent years becoming good at something. You earned your place. You were the expert, the reliable one, the person others came to for answers. Being a beginner again threatens that identity. It feels like erasing progress, like stepping backward instead of forward. In 2026, this is one of the biggest reasons capable, disciplined people feel stuck. They confuse adaptation with failure. They assume that if they have to relearn, pivot, or change direction, it means their past effort didn't matter. So they cling to familiar systems long after those systems stop rewarding them. Not because they don't see the change, but because acknowledging it feels like admitting defeat. It took you to get here. It only responds to what you can do next. That's not cruelty. It's physics. Progress follows momentum, not history. And the faster systems evolve, the more expensive pride becomes. What makes this harder is that adaptation doesn't come with applause. There's no ceremony for learning something new. No recognition for being uncomfortable. You look around and see younger people moving faster, using tools you don't fully understand, speaking a language that didn't exist when you started. And instead of seeing opportunity, you feel pressure. Comparison replaces curiosity. But here's the reality. Starting over isn't the same as going backward. Reinvention isn't erasure, it's upgrade. Every system you understand now gives you leverage when you learn the next one. The problem isn't that learning is hard. The problem is that ego convinces you you're supposed to already know. Hardworking people often wait too long to adapt because they think consistency will save them. They believe if they just hold on, the world will slow down or circle back. Momentum doesn't reverse for comfort. And the longer you delay learning, the more overwhelming the gap feels. The shift happens when you stop protecting your past identity and start investing in your future relevance. When curiosity becomes stronger than pride. When you accept that feeling inexperienced is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of growth. The most dangerous position in a fast-moving world is believing you've already arrived. Adaptation isn't betrayal of who you were. It's loyalty to who you're becoming. And the moment you choose learning over ego, forward motion returns. Beneath all the frustration, exhaustion, and relentless effort, there's a quiet fear that drives many hardworking people. The fear of being left behind. It's subtle at first. You tell yourself you're keeping pace. You reassure yourself that your work ethic will carry you forward. But, deep down, there's a nagging thought. What if I did everything right, and it still isn't enough? What if the world accelerates faster than I can catch up? In 2026, that fear isn't irrational. Systems evolve faster, expectations rise quicker, and opportunities multiply in ways that can feel both exciting and terrifying. People who've been disciplined for years start to notice the gap. The gap between where they are and where the world seems to be going. And it doesn't matter how much effort you've put in. Suddenly, effort alone can feel powerless. What makes this fear so paralyzing is that it operates quietly. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It whispers every time you scroll through achievements of others. It whispers when new technologies emerge that challenge your expertise. It whispers in meetings when younger voices present solutions you hadn't considered. And the louder the world moves, the louder that whisper grows. Most people respond in one of two ways. Some freeze, holding on to what they know, hoping the future bends back toward them. Others run, doubling their hours, pushing themselves beyond sustainable limits, thinking that more effort will bridge the gap. But neither approach addresses the real issue. The problem isn't your work ethic. The problem is that the rules have shifted and staying in the old pattern isn't enough anymore. The shift happens when you see that fear not as a threat, but as a signal. The signal is saying, you need to evolve. You need to learn faster. You need to choose direction over motion. Feeling left behind isn't a reflection of inadequacy. It's a reflection of a system that rewards those who can anticipate, adapt, and act strategically. The people who thrive aren't always the hardest workers. They're the ones willing to embrace change before it's forced upon them. And here's the paradox. The fear of being left behind can either trap you or propel you. It becomes a trap when it triggers comparison, anxiety, or paralysis. It becomes propulsion when it sharpens your focus, clarifies your priorities, and forces you to act with intentionality. The same fear that makes people feel stuck is the same fear that can create extraordinary momentum if you lean into it rather than run from it. So if you feel the weight of a future moving faster than you expected, don't let it crush you. Let it guide you. Let it reveal where your attention needs to go, what skills you need to cultivate, and what direction you need to take. Hard work alone won't move you forward anymore. Awareness, adaptability, and courage will. The moment you stop fearing the pace of the world and start mastering your place in it, you stop feeling stuck and start building the life you were meant to reach.